It's a full-blown media mutiny against the elderly man with a poor memory. The liberal press is now openly calling for Joe Biden to step aside as a stunning number of Americans question his age and cognitive decline. 86% think Biden is too old to serve, following that bombshell classified documents report that questioned his memory. That includes 73% of Democrats. It's probably why the New York Times is running these back-to-back hit pieces. One is from the editorial board, which says, quote, "The challenges of an aging president." And another columnist putting it more bluntly, quote, "The question is not if Biden should step aside, it's how." But Joe isn't going to go quietly to the nursing home yet. The president sending his army of smooth-talking Democrats to defend his mental state and blame the media.
He is sharp. He is on top of things.
The one thing Joe Biden is never going to do is count on this. He is never, ever going to quit.
The most difficult part about a meeting with President Biden is preparing for it, because he is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
If press coverage focuses relentlessly on things that don't represent Joe Biden's real body of work.
You're sitting in the White House and on the campaign right now. You're absolutely banging your head against the wall at the way that the Thursday report has been covered. Wall-to-wall coverage of whether a guy who's 4 years older than his opponent is too old to be president.
The reason the polls are what they are is because Democrats are buying into the narrative that Republicans are creating and amplifying.
And no matter how hard Joe Biden tries to reassure Americans that his brain's working all right, there's always another sandbag he trips on or dead president he talks to. Check out this video of the president bumping his head while exiting Marine One this weekend. And Biden thinks his faulty memory is all a joke.
But I didn't realize, and I've been around, I know I don't look like it, but I've been around a while. I do remember that.
Dana Perino, how do you think the left has digested this Thursday news dump and the press conference afterwards?
It's sitting in there like a Cliff Bar. They never digest. I'm telling you, I can't stand it. Also, I've never bumped my head.
No?
No, it's like I'm just too short.
It hurts.
So it must have hurt. I saw a tweet over the weekend that was talking about how in 1984, the press said that Reagan was too old. He was 73. That Bob Dole was too old in 1996 when he was 73, and that John McCain was too old in 2008. But until last week, until last Thursday, the press was willing to look the other way on Biden. And then 86% of Americans said, no, actually, this is what we think. And I got to tell you, if I was in the White House, I'm thinking, how are we supposed to fight against 86% of the country? You can send out as many people as you want to say that he's great. That's not what people are seeing. People might have respect for him. They might have respect for the office of the presidency. But they see what they see. They hear the cadence, and the knives are out from Democrat graybeards like James Carville. And I feel like last week was the death knell for the campaign. I don't know if they know that yet. And if they don't make any changes, and they might not, then they're looking at a likely loss in November.
Greg, what about when they say it's so difficult to prepare for a meeting with Joe Biden? Does anybody really believe that?
No, I don't think so. But what's amazing, and I think it's great news, and I hate the negativity from you, Dana. But it's so like you.
It's hard for me.
It's so, yes. 86% agree that Joe is a problem. He finally fulfilled one campaign promise. He unified the country.
Yep.
I mean, 86% don't agree on anything. Anything. This is a kumbaya moment. This is our national anthem. We don't need two of them here. But I think, going to what Mayorkas was saying, maybe it's not about dementia. It's dementia plus Joe Biden. Because remember, when he was younger, he wasn't really a principled, persuasive human being. He was narcissistic. He was a plagiarist. He was a phony blowhard. He was plagiarizing back in the 70s and 80s. And I'm not talking about his age. I'm talking about decades. I think that we're accrediting dementia with stolen valor. I mean, you could argue that the dementia is containing Joe. Finding out Joe has dementia is like finding out the Titanic has rust. It just came a little later. But I also love that Jen Psaki says that the White House staff is banging their heads against the wall. They're doing that. That's the only way they can understand the president. you know? I think they should be grateful that Biden got this far. He's like a car driving on bald tires on fumes, and they kept driving past the exits, you know, next gaff 4 miles, next gaff 15 miles. We can make it, and they almost made it. So the media in the White House, they deserve props for keeping him president this long, like for protecting him like a Fabergé egg. You even have the LA Times. You saw what they said, that his age is a superpower.
Yeah.
That's like saying the Hulk's superpower is that his clothes don't fit. It's just what you see.
Judge Jeanine, now like blatant speculation about replacing him at the convention this summer.
Yeah, you know, Politico came out with an article this afternoon, and they talk about one of the ways that Joe Biden can get out of office and kind of maintain his dignity, which is basically at the end of the primary season on June 4th to say, look, I won the primary and I'm fit to serve, but I understand the public's concerns. And so I'm going to release my delegates. I've done my duty. I defeated Donald Trump once. And just as an FYI, his delegates don't automatically go to Kamala, and then they can fight it out. But look, Dana and Greg are right. 86% of the country can't agree that it's sunny or that the sun shines on a sunny day. I mean, you just can't do that. And the real problem is in the swing states, more than 70% of the people believe that he is too old and doesn't have the cognitive ability to run for a second term. I don't think he can finish this term. And one of the issues for me is that when you have a president who wasn't even aware that his Secretary of Defense was not around at a time when we're in the middle of 2 wars, when men are being hit, and the servicemen and women with traumatic brain injury and all kinds of other injuries, when you've got a guy who's testifying before Congress, his Homeland Security Secretary, who says, no, the border's secure, when the president is saying the border hasn't been secure for 10 years, finally, he's not in sync with any of the people in his administration. So you have to say not only who's running it, but is he talking to anyone? But here, I think, is the big issue. He needs to take a cognitive test. There is too much at stake. 86% of Americans think he's too old cognitively, right? This special counsel came out and said, hey, everybody, I spent 5 hours with this guy. I spent 5 hours, and he's a well-meaning man with, a deficient memory, with a poor memory and diminished capacity and faculties. In the end, he's got to take a cognitive test, and they should release the transcript of the interview that led this special counsel to say, this man, you can't even prosecute him. He's not compos mentis. And so what we've got to try to figure out is how this translates from there isn't anyone who would give the guy a regular job. Would you employ Joe Biden for anything? No. But we've got him running the country. The whole thing is ridiculous, and it's got to come to an end somehow.
So who has this conversation, Harold Ford? Is it Dr. Jill? Is it Barack Obama? What's the process if this happens this way?
Good to be back around the table. I think you've mentioned 1 or 2 names that probably would be there. Look, let me take a step back. I think it's healthy that our press is raising these questions. We sometimes around the table, I think justifiably, are critical when the broader press and everyone in the press is not raising some of the things that we're raising. Well, they are raising this issue now, and I think it was the catalyst for it, obviously, was the Hur report certainly accelerated us to this point. 2, both of these candidates, I think we shouldn't kid ourselves. Both of them probably lost their fastballs. Both are a little old. We live in a country where innovators and ideas and thinkers throughout our 250 almost year history have been able to emerge to the fore in business and academia and politics. And I think we find ourselves, Republicans find themselves, Democrats find themselves, independents find themselves asking, at least I've heard, is this the best that we can do? I'm not suggesting the 2 of them are, I'm not an ageist, I'm not suggesting the 2 of them are not capable and smart and patriotic people. But I think at some level people ask these questions. And the Democratic Party, to your point, Jesse, is going to have some questions to answer. If 85+% of the country over the next few months believe that our nominee could not last for 4 more years, you can't ignore that. Now, you can ignore it if you want to lose. But I think at some point you have to factor all of those things in. Now, I watched him I'm happy to see him taking some of the advice that Dana and I have been trying to give, which is tick off the things that you've done. talk about the things you want to do going forward. Identify for the next 5, 10, 15 years, what are the most important issues the country is going to face, from rebuilding our military, from reforming our education system, from finding ways to pay our bills. What is it that you're going to do that makes you so unique as a candidate that the country has to have you and that you're almost indispensable for the moment?
You saw him do that?
No. I saw him. He ticked off some of the things that he has done. He's got it. Neither of them have done it. All Trump does is criticize people he doesn't like.
Harold,
all Biden does, I don't think Biden is doing an effective job. Neither of them are, frankly.
Incapable.
But Harold, I got to take issue with you crediting the media. The only reason why they're doing
I'm
this,
saying they're doing the things that we're saying.
They did it because it was unavoidable.
Yeah.
It's just like the border issue and the crime issue. They wait for the breaking point when their back's up against the wall. Joe's dead man walking, not even sure he's walking, maybe dead man napping, and it's like now we're.
But Greg, I don't disagree with you, but I said last week it'd be like Democrats. If we want to bring the border thing up, it'd be like Democrats saying to a Republican president, "We're not going to do a gun bill with you because we don't want you to get the credit for it." I don't care when people come around. That's just how I was raised, and perhaps that's how my politics is. I just think if somebody comes around, you know what I say? Come on.
Mm-hmm. But they would have maybe made a different decision over the holidays about him running again if the media hadn't sheltered them from this criticism.
Well, if there'd been a Hur report in December, you're probably right. There's no doubt that would have been a catalyst for this. I'm not naive.
You don't need a Hur report.
You don't. You don't. It was obvious to the public. The man can't walk without stumbling. And for the first time I saw him trip at that graduation, he couldn't get up. He tried to get up once and he couldn't get up on his own. I mean, this is a real problem. The man stumbles. He's angry after he has to defend himself. That's part of the cognitive decline. You get outraged and angry. It's all in front of us.
Is that what it is?
All right.
Yeah, for you.
Harold, you tried your best. Good job.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.